I'm Doc Hollingsworth. I'm pastor of Second-Ponce Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's my privilege to be hosting today a conversation with two of Atlanta's respected leaders in the healthcare field. They are mental health specialists, both therapists in Atlanta, but more important to our conversation today, they're also active Christians and church people. And so today we're saying hello and welcome to my friend Lanta Cooper. Both of these guests have been friends of mine for a long time, and also to Doyle Hamilton. Lanta has two master's degrees. I'm trying to illustrate both the professionalism and the faith component. Lanta has a Master of Divinity degree, but also a Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. Doyle, and Lanta's practice is here in Brookhaven. Doyle is in Roswell. Also, he is a marriage and family therapist, licensed marriage and family therapist, but has a Doctor of Ministry degree as well and works out of First Baptist Church in Roswell. Both of these folks have been friends of mine for a very long time, and so I have the highest degree of confidence in the conversation we're going to have today. Let me say a word about what we're hoping to accomplish today. As the pandemic starts to loosen its grip on everybody, we're facing a new set of issues as we work into re-entry into work and life. It's all over the spectrum. Some people are already back to almost full speed life like it was before the pandemic. Others are still at home in their pajamas and wearing a mask. But eventually, everybody is going to be getting back into work and their social lives, and that brings a unique set of challenges that these two professionals are going to help us unpack today. We're asking, in a more focused way, how leaders, Sunday school teachers, other teachers, office managers, how do leaders notice the behaviors that are different? How do they support and aid healthy behaviors? And how do these leaders identify behaviors that are unhealthy and help people find help for those? So my thanks to both of you. And Lanta, I'll start the conversation with you. Of course, we know we can't disclose anything particular of confidence, but I'm wondering what you've seen in the last year in your counseling practice that's different. What are new issues emerging, or what are issues that are emerging with greater frequency or intensity than before the pandemic?
Absolutely. I think Doyle would probably agree with me in our work that we're seeing heightened anxiety, more extreme levels of depression, or more long-term processing of what these depression symptoms are in light of the pandemic. Especially now as we're months past the pandemic start point, more PTSD and really a physical symptomology of the processing of what this global trauma has on an impact for this individual human body across the board. Like, we're just seeing that differently. And I would also say grief. Naturally, we're grieving the loss of a lot of loved ones, but grief isn't limited to just a physical death. It's also so many other forms of loss. Loss of a dream or a goal or a job, loss of a hope or loss of control. So much of us have felt that. And so the ways that we are honoring all of these various forms of grief, it's so important, but helping people have language for this can be grief, this is a form of loss, this irritability or this lack of sleep or restlessness or frustration that they're feeling within themselves and within their bodies. I keep going back to the physical symptoms that we can listen to and notice and honor differently. So those are some of the symptoms that I'm seeing escalated and heightened right now, for sure.
we might not have time for this, but I'm wondering what's going to happen in the church around the grief we didn't get to do corporately.
Yes.
I've had maybe 30 funerals, and we didn't get to do those as a community. They were often 10 people around a gravesite, and we couldn't hug each other. And I don't know what that's going to look like. Doyle, what are you seeing that's different?
Many of the things that Lanta was talking about, I performed a graveside for a family, and only the family could attend. And you're right, there was like 8 people there. So congregations hadn't had the opportunity to give voice in a ritual way that we take so for granted, right? Of public worship during the grief of the loss. I've seen the things that, COVID has been a trigger for anxiety and depression and mental health in general. It's also been an interesting trigger for addictions that has heightened. I can think of the last couple weeks, maybe 4 people in my office have said, I'm aware that I'm drinking too much, and during COVID, I was drinking too much. And it's a problem. And I say, well, good for you for saying that, because the good thing is that there's something you can do about it. So eating, I heard an article the other day that people have eating issues with the way that we've been doing family life and ordering of food and all of that. Isolation. I would say that COVID has been a trigger for isolation. And we know that mental health is not helped with isolation. Whatever you're talking about, it's not done well in isolation. So to me, that's been significant for congregations and for families.
In some ways, loneliness was a pandemic before COVID was. I mean, this had to just...
Exactly.
There are a lot of folks in this church. One woman told me, if I don't get a hug on Sunday, I don't get a hug all week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what did this do to the loneliness that was already out there?
Exactly. And think of the patients that were hospitalized that no one could visit.
Yeah.
And even families that were impacted by death and no one could be present. I mean, we had several families impacted in that way. It's very challenging.
Well, Lanta, what have we got to relearn? There's a lot of our habits and our socialization and all that we just kind of let atrophy right,
Yes.
over a
Yes.
year and a half. What are you already seeing, and what are you anticipating about what muscles people are going to have to work again coming forward?
Sure. It's interesting because when I first hear that question, I put into the context my 3-year-old daughter, and she's not relearning these things. She's learning them for the very first time. And in that way, it has me acutely aware of the social skills, the social development, the emotional development, all of these things that are so critical, especially for her age group and this youngest generation that's going through, being children of the pandemic. And I'm very curious to see how it's going to impact them growing up. And I'm hoping that they do pick up on things like empathy and compassion, connectivity, the sacredness of holding eye contact with someone, and getting to see the image of God in their neighbor when they've been so far removed from that. So I share the stress with other parents of young children that we hope and keep our fingers crossed that as they do re-enter the world, that they are learning these things for the first time with wonder, with curiosity, and are able to embrace their neighbor in a way that is truly sacred. I do think my clients and more adult age bracket, we are navigating what it feels like to even hold a conversation with someone that's not on a screen.
Right.
We're learning how to navigate social anxiety that now has resurfaced or definitely been exacerbated during the pandemic. How to pay attention to social cues and how to connect with other people. Even not letting a hug be awkward anymore
Yeah,
and not letting
yeah.
it be uncomfortable. You know, there's still an unease in being able to hold that embrace and connect with someone in a different way. So I think we're seeing a lot of resistance, and everybody's going to be at their own pace.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's, I think, a challenge when we might be at our pace and somebody else is at a completely different pace, how to respect, like, you're still at stage 1 over here and I'm at stage 10. Like, how do we navigate that and respect each other's individual autonomy and adjusting to this new way of living or reliving?
I talk a lot with families about how to respect the differences and expression of grief within the family. Whether one is intuitive and wants to talk, or one's more instrumental and wants to do something. So how do you support the family when one wants to talk and the last thing one would want to do is to talk? So how do you support each other in the light of that?
To illustrate what y'all are talking about, I went to a dinner party last night, walked in, hugged the hostess, turned to the next person, and she said,
Oh.
right? Like they were just
Yes.
completely on different, yeah.
And comfortability is so across the spectrum. We found that
Right.
within our congregation. Some are comfortable with a mask, and some have refused to wear a mask, and all in between.
So how do we set the tone in the environments we have some control over? Say you're a Sunday school teacher of an adult class, or you're an office manager, right? How do we set the tone that allows the kind of respect for that freedom and nurtures something positive? Where do y'all think?
Well, in our congregation, we let the classes vote, and the class decided what they wanted to do. And we have options for people that feel more comfortable with masks, and there are classes for them, and there are classes that people vote to not have masks. And I promise you, it's across the board. It's been surprising to me.
It's so across the board. So options, 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 and honoring the autonomy of each individual person based on their needs. So respecting that some people may, from a corporate perspective in the office, they still may not be comfortable even coming in, just as much as others have been back in the office for months.
Right.
And just being able to embrace that uncertainty, because we are still in a phase of uncertainty, even though we're also unraveling and coming out of it.
All right, you opened up the sacred language, so let me ask this one. So I'm really interested in the church's role in this healing, reforming. It strikes me that I'm saying almost every miracle of Jesus because I'm catching my language. But all the miracles I can think of right now that involved healing also involve touch, right? I mean, there is something in the Christian community around healthy touch that's healing. And we are at our core an incarnational presence. How do we reclaim that and do that in healthy ways in a flat Zoom world?
That's a wonderful question, because I had a member of the congregation that refused to shake my hand right when we were coming back together. And I wanted to respect that. At the same time, it was so different than, I felt comfortable shaking his hand, but he didn't feel comfortable shaking my hand. So how do you reintegrate and become community in the midst of those differences? I think the COVID-19 has exacerbated divisions even within the congregation, even within the family. Family life and congregational life.
For me, it's about our nervous system, like truly understanding that these things that are very natural cues of safety, connection, touch, these are integrated into our nervous system as safe and wholesome and good. And the pandemic completely took our cues of safety and flipped them upside down, and they became instant cues of danger. and our nervous system is reacting to that. And it's, again, it's this unraveling is the best language that I can come up with and think of as I process this with myself, with my family, with my clients. And we have to recognize that for some people, the nervous system response, this is still a cue of danger for them. And it takes time to get back to reestablishing this baseline of safety that has always been for our generations.
You've helped me reframe that. I mean, that in the church, we've traditionally thought of touch as part of the healing, part of the community, part of what makes us whole and one. And for the last year and a half, touch has been a threat.
Yes.
It has been a real threat. So how do we make that shift, right?
Well, we have to rethink connection.
Yeah.
So there are ways to be present and connected. I said several years ago I would never do telemental health. And I did that for everyone.
Yeah, had to.
And I found that some people prefer that. Even after I'm seeing folks, I don't know if you're doing telemental still, but some people like it. But to me, it lacks what I find so important.
Yeah, that's it. And I have such an incarnational theology that preaching in this empty room to a TV camera has been
So
pretty
difficult.
tough.
We didn't learn that in seminary, did we?
No, we didn't.
No.
So we've talked about behaviors that are kind of on the continuum of normal struggle in the reentry. What do leaders need to be looking for that's beyond healthy struggle? What are clues that people might need to be reaching out to a mental health professional, because it's not just the reentry stress, but it's really not healthy behavior?
I would say pay attention to the isolation. So if you are aware that there are people not returning, that might be an opportunity to reach out by a phone call or an email or a text. And also pay attention to the language, be a good listener, and pay attention and be curious about the language of the conversation when you're curious about how's it been, what are you learning, what's been hard for you, and let the individual guide the conversation. Just be a good listener is my words of wisdom.
Right.
Yeah, I'm wrestling with that because respecting each person's unique autonomy and how do you navigate, when they are isolated, what's the reason for the isolation? And is it because they're still uncomfortable putting themselves into a larger group setting? And if so, that's where the role of deacons is like perfect right now. You can potentially do home visits or front yard visits and connect with your members that way, in a way that's helping you hear more of the story. And there are still ways to enhance that connection and be on the lookout for what is this isolation representing? And is there something that is more of a red flag? Is this anxiety exacerbated to the point where they just need someone to listen and talk to and be seen in a different way that is still disorienting for so many people right now? And empowering your deacon leadership or whoever the congregational leaders are to really reach out in a way that helps be a bridge to say, okay, I'm so glad we got to connect. I'm so glad we got to have this conversation. And that it's also okay to see a therapist. That it's also okay to talk to someone more regularly. And I think this is where the opportunity for churches is to raise funds and have scholarships available and increase their referral base. Wouldn't you say, Doyle?
Absolutely.
Like, to know who those top 5, top 10 therapists are that you trust, that you've had coffee with or gotten to meet and connect with, and know what their, who they serve and what their level of expertise is and areas of expertise are, so that you can be the connecting point that says, have you met Doyle? Like, let's connect. And if you need support and additional funding resources, we've got these funds available for you, and this is how we want to come alongside you right now.
Well, two of those I trust and admire showed up today. So thank you.
Thank you.
What did I not ask that you need to say? What do you wish folks heard from the therapeutic community that might not be getting out there and being heard?
I would add, edit judgment. To not be judgmental. Because judgment's not going to help anxiety, depression, eating disorder, or addiction. So be a hospitality welcome mat where you let the person tell their story in their own way, and be a good listener, I would say. Church, I mean, I grew up in the church, but we can be very judgmental.
No.
And it doesn't help. It doesn't help the things we're talking about.
Yeah.
Judgment does not help.
That it's okay to not be okay still. It's
Yeah.
still okay to have that uncertainty, have that restlessness, be searching for what is underneath that. And I think there's an invitation for all of us to be more compassionate to our interpersonal self and selves, that we are listening to the cues of our bodies, of our longings, of the things that are nurturing us and protecting us. And if those are things that we know we need, that we can seek them out, and that there are spaces and communities that are there to join alongside us on this journey. But for Sunday school teachers and leaders to know that you can meet your people right where they are, in whatever level they're in, and there's potentially an impatience with that. Like, why aren't they okay with this already? If you've already been there, it's such a source of misunderstanding and disconnection, and that's the opposite of the goal, which is to foster more nurture and connection right now, especially for such a time as this.
Well, thank you. Fostering more nurturing conversations is exactly what this is about. This isn't the end of this conversation. My hope is that these two friends have opened up for us the possibility of resources that are here in Atlanta for folks to get the help they need. Doyle and Lanta's contact information will be a part of this on your screen, and I hope if you feel a need that you'll reach out to one of these friends I trust so much. But also our church office will help you find other important resources in the city if you have need. My thanks again to the two of you for just a great conversation. And my thanks to Gail Suggs, who first saw the need for this conversation and did so much of the behind-the-scenes work to make this conversation happen today. Do contact our office if Second-Ponce can be a resource to your coming back into society and a resource into your faith journey. Thank you.